Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for letting me speak at your conference. I will talk today about how we use in KBR a large language model for automated cataloging and classification. I am Hans Loagi and I work in KBR, and KBR is the National Library of Belgium. We have a lot of books, but we have also a lot of patrimonial objects like coins, medals, manuscripts, and so on. But we have a lot of books, as I said, and most importantly, also we have legal deposits. So every book that is published in Belgium or by a Belgian author has to be deposited in KBR. And we publish every month our national bibliography, and we use a local classification for it, as you can see at the right. And already important to know, as you can see at the bottom left, we use also a local identifier that starts with lexicon, underscore, and a number. A couple of years ago, we created a Power App. So we used the Power Platform to create a custom application to detect the main bibliographic information from a title page in order to tackle our retrocatalography. So we had a lot of books in our stacks who were not yet cataloged, and by using the Microsoft Power Platform, we could create a custom application to extract and validate the data. Because Power Platform offers a user-friendly way to create an application or using Power Automate, so automatization. And as you can see, one of the main components of the Power Platform is AI Builder. An AI Builder is a Microsoft that offers some AI models, custom or pre-trained, to use in your automatization or application. And we use now the same principle for legal deposit. So we scan the title page, but also the colophon to detect title author, but also ISBN, legal deposit number, the information that you can find on the colophon of a book. And since we use it for our legal deposit books, so on the contemporary books, it would also be interesting to add our national classification that we use in our Belgian bibliography. So that's why we were interested in testing the large language models. And today I will show how we use now two AI prompts within an automation. So we scan the book and automatically we can add also a classification. Also without scanning the books, I will show you later. These are the AI models that Microsoft offers. So it's extract information from a book, detect the language, predict information, and so on. But since 2024, they also included GPT, and we could use now a prompt in our automatization to use the large language model to give more information or to use the text information. It's possible to define the input. It's possible to define what do we want as an output. Do we want text or JSON? It's possible to link with existing tables in our Dataverse, one of the components of the Power Platform. And as you can see at the right, the standard is GPT-4o mini model, but you can choose one. You can change the temperature. You can change the record retrieval, so the number of database he has to consult. And we use it now for two prompts, one for classification and one for subject indexing. The first one of the classification, it was important that the output was useful automatically. So I said in the beginning that we use a local identifier for classification. We want that the outcome is that identifier, not a label like sports or economy. No, the identifier and only the identifier. Also, we wanted to avoid unnecessary information like, sure, here's the classification, or do you want me to do something else? Explain why he gave an explanation, classification, and so on. That's the first thing. Second thing, we also want that it's language independent. So we have a lot of books in French, Dutch, German. In Belgium, we are a multilingual country. So it's important for automatization that we do not have to say this is a French text, this is a Dutch text, but he can interpret all languages. And it's also important that we can modify or influence the results. When he consistently makes an error, that we can say, yeah, for that type of text, please give that classification and not the one you're doing now, for example. It's possible to give two variables. So a variable is something that changes for every record. If, for example, the input text is the information that we get from the scan or from the bibliographic record. So it's a title, a subtitle, a summary, or back cover text when we scan a book, and existing subject terms when it's already an existing record. And that the second variable is our local list of classifications. So we do not want that the prompt invents something. We want our local classification or local lexicon identifier as outcome. So we send it not only the list, but we send like this. So we have our local identifier, semicolon, and then the label equals, and then more textual information, what the label means or what we in KBR understand by that classification. So the local thesaurus identifier and the textual information. And this textual information gives us the possibility to influence the records. We can add things to the text. We can say, yeah, but do not add this term for that kind of books, and so on. So this is the first prompt. It's a classify the input text, so the information from the bibliographical record, into one of the categories listed here. That's the first thing. And then we send the Excel, as I have shown in the previous slide, to the prompt. Then I explain what it is, the two variables. The input text is information about the book. The classifications is a list of categories. Follow the thesaurus code, semicolon, and a description of the code. And then I say, what do we have to do now? So analyze the key themes and the context of the input text and determine the most appropriate category from the list. Ignore the order of the categories, because in the first, he gave the first classification that was more or less correct to the term, but no, we want that he looks at every classification and then add the correct category. And we only want one, not 3 or 4, only the main classification and only the classification. Here we say, for example, the last thing is do not assign categories that are not in the list. So the prompt has to give a list, one of our local classification, and not invent one. And we also say, okay, use the description after the semicolon to ensure the accurate classification. So this is the first prompt. For example, a book about Belgium, a history. So the history of Belgium, we sent the title, we sent the author, we sent the summary, and the outcome is lexicon 00102. And you can see here that lexicon 00102 equals our label of history of Belgium. So here the book is Belgium, a history. The correct classification is history of Belgium. This is the first prompt. Then the second is the subject indexing. And here we want multiple terms. So it's important that the output is a JSON, because it's multiple terms that we have the same structured information. And that's why JSON is important. We also want not only the label, but also the type. Is it a personal name? Is it a form genre? Is it a topical term? And so on. And we want to use a fast heading. So we'll use that JSON, the information from the JSON, to search also the API of OCLC. So this is my second prompt. I say, okay, give a fast subject heading, but I will check with fast later. So I already say in the prompt, give a fast subject heading. For the input text, again, an explanation of the input text. The output must be JSON. We do not want medieval Flanders, but we want Middle Ages as topical term and Flanders as geographic name, for example. And then we also ask it code. Personal name is 00, corporate name is 10. And we'll use that code for searching in the OCLC API later. I'll show you later. And then I also give an example of how we want the JSON, because it's also important for automatization that every JSON looks the same or is the same structured. For example, here we have colonialization, topical term, and the code 50, because 50 is a topical term, 55 is a form genre, science fiction, and so on. So this is an example, the same example, Belgium history, and he gives as an answer Belgium geographic names, history, topical term, political evolution, topical term, cultural conflict, also topical term, and European integration. I will use cultural conflict in the next to check with the OCLC API. So this is the whole workflow. We get the information from the existing record, we create the input text, we use the input text for the classification. When the output of the first prompt classification is non-fiction, because we do not have add a subject term for fiction. So when it's non-fiction, use the second prompt, and then search the outcome of the second prompt. So the JSON gets the term and search it in the fast OCLC API, and then add everything to the record. Okay, so again, here is an example, Belgian history. You can see it has a title, subtitle, but also the abstract. We use our SRU to get the information in Mark XML. We say, okay, take $255 $A, $B, $520 A. This is the input text, and the output is the lexicon identifier. So we saw already that this is a term of the history of Belgium. Okay, it's non-fiction, so use the second prompt. And the second prompt, we also saw that it gives Belgium geographic name, cultural conflict as topical term, and so on. And then I say, okay, now use, and that's the advantage of the automatization, you can add automatically an API search. So a HTTP query that says suggest code. So query index is suggest code. And why? Because in the documentation of the API, you can search using the suggest and the code only topical terms, for example. When you say suggest 50 topical terms, suggest 51 geographic name. And that's why I use, or I ask to the prompt also to send me the code, because then I can use it automatically to search only in the topical terms or only in the geographic names. Query return is the parameter of what do I want in return. And what do I want in return is this. And the most important information is the ID, so the fast ID, and the authority, so the cultural conflict, the authorized form. So I use the term, the authorized form, and the ID to create finally my 653. For the moment, I use 653 because we still have to reconcile our existing subject terms and authorities with FAST. And when we have that, we can use the fast URI to check and search the existing database and then add the correct 6051, 652, and so on. But for the moment, we don't have it yet. So I just added 653 with $A and $E of $1. And the $1, when you click on it, you open the correct term, a cultural conflict, and the correct record from FAST API. And then I also use the second identifier to indicate the type. So in 653 and Mark 21, with the second identifier, you can indicate the type of term. Is it a topical term again, personal name, and so on. So my conclusion is this is now live since January. I did not test it a lot. I just put it in production and then asked to my catalogers, okay, when the classification is not correct, fill in this form, fill in an Excel, and then I can use it to improve the terms. So the Excel file that I showed, the text to influence the records in the future. I think it was easier because I can test with 100 records myself, but the real test is really in production. And because my team was informed, they just had me know when it's not working well, and then I can improve it later. So that's important, certainly now from this phase, that a human cataloger always validates. And that's also why we can put it so fast in production, because there's a validation and the catalogers helps improving the workflow. We already see that it saves time in classification. If, for example, a travel book gets the classification travel books, okay, it's correct. We don't have to do anything else. But we also see that text alone is not only sufficient. For example, when we have a novel about a child that discovers a new world, for example, only based on the text we cannot know if it's a novel or a comic book, because a comic book you can recognize when you see the book in hand. You can see, okay, it's a comic book, but you cannot see it only based on the text. That's why we also include now the publisher, because sometimes the publisher can influence also. This is Dupuis, it's very known for publishing a comic book, so probably I see that the publisher is Dupuis, so it will also be a comic book. And the prompt knows that, because sometimes in the testing phase, I asked to the prompts, why do you give a certain category to understand? And one of the reasons was then also, yeah, but this publisher is known to be published comic books, so we add the classification comic book. So this is really good. So I think in general that this method offers great potential, just because the AI is and the large language model is included in a whole automatization. Um, and finally, it's a bit of publicity for my book, because I wrote a book about can you create your own cataloging application in Power Platform. So how you can start creating a Power Apps. So it's not published yet. It's foreseen for this summer, July 2025. But you can also go on the website and pre-order it. And when you have a question, do not hesitate to my email address. That's also on this slide. It's hans.logi@kbr.be. Thank you very much.